Welcome to New York's #2 sports show. The Rangers trailed 4-0 going into the third period, tied the game up 4-4, but ultimately lost in overtime 5-4 to the Columbus Blue Jackets at Madison Square Garden. And this comeback was led by Gabe Perreault, who had 2 goals and an assist for 3 points in the third period. So that's the good news out of this. It's beyond frustrating that this Ranger team, and again, give them credit for doing it. And I've said they have had comeback ability this season, especially at home, which was the complete opposite of last year. I said ad nauseum how many times where, again, down by 2 goals, the Rangers only had 1 win, and it was the second last game of the season last year after they had just been eliminated. So it is a quality that you want to have, and the players, they're not trying to tank, right? They are there to win games. That's just what it is. But as someone who, really wants to have the best odds possible to have the best, draft pick that they can get, it's tough. I mean, I'm glad they didn't win the game, but again, down. I mean, it doesn't speak well to Columbus. A team that's fighting to meet the playoffs. Now, to be fair, Zach Werenski was out due to illness, which is a massive, massive injury. So the Rangers' last 2 games, no Sidney Crosby at the Penguins, no Zach Werenski here. And so the Rangers have gotten 4 points out of a possible 6 out of the break. And the schedule, the next 5 or so games, it's not that difficult. I fear that the Rangers, there's more points to be had here. Now, look, this was probably Vincent Trocheck's last game, but in the sense of other teams that the Rangers are competing against for, again, that number 2 slot, number 3, 4, so on, presumably those teams will be trading off pieces as well, right? When you think about, the St. Louis's of the world, Chicago, Calgary, just to name a few, and those are the biggest ones. Like, look, they're in sell mode as well. So, I don't want to make too much of that, but how could it not be frustrating? 4-0. I mean, it was one thing for these 2-0. Again, the Rangers were the ones that blew the 2-0 game against Philly. That was one point that I felt pretty good about. As I said, that's one that it's like, all right, like Rangers should have probably gotten 2, only got 1. The Penguin game, that was ultra frustrating because to me, they should have gotten none and then ended up with 2. And when I say should, it's more of where the game originally was. Again, like the Rangers deserve props for turning, games around. But here, 4-0, just unbelievable. The fact that they were able to do that, with no Artemi Panarin, a team that doesn't, Rangers don't score goals. And yet they are able to do that by scoring 4 in the third. But yeah, a lot of different storylines going on around this team right now with the deadline, only, at this point about 3-4 days away, and only 1 more game before the deadline. And at that point, we may learn a lot more. I mean, there's 3 possibilities as far as Vincent Trocheck at that point. Either A, he's already traded by that game, which is possible. I don't know. I feel like they might, for negotiating purposes, I feel like they may let it go to the very end, which I think is maybe a reason why he played in this game at all, right? I'm trying to understand the reasons behind that. And I think, look, he's not an unrestricted free agent. It's not like Artemi Panarin. You don't have to you don't want to risk the injury. And I would have, in some ways, preferred he not play, but I also kind of get, it does make some sense to have in this game. I think the Toronto game is a different story. A night before the deadline, and that one, I think in all likelihood, not 100%, that this was probably Vincent Trocheck's last game as a Ranger. And the interesting thing, the juxtaposition there is that it would have, for him to have ended his Ranger career last game, would have been kind of nice for him. He gets the shootout winner, right? That would be a pretty solid swan song, and not for nothing. It's not like it was in Pittsburgh, but it was against his childhood hometown team in the Pittsburgh Penguins. But he goes again. In this game, and in this one, in the overtime, he, fucks up and was way too aggressive, almost like Cale Makar in the 3-on-3 in the Olympic gold medal game, and it leads to Columbus getting the game-winning goal. So it is interesting, a stark difference in the end of the game for Vincent Trocheck. I guess in terms of more off the ice stuff, and then we'll get more into the game, where again Gabe Perreault factors in largely. They yet again, Adam Fox, he was asked to clarify and just get another chance to speak on, his comments after the Flyer game. And he basically doubled down. And again, it's more about what he didn't say than what he did say, especially in this case, Right, because last time we talked about, oh, we'll talk about it at the end of the season. He didn't say that this time, but it was more, hey, we're just taking things game by game. Um, didn't give you a whole lot of anything, right? He could have just said, hey, I love being a Ranger, or he could have given you something. And I also don't blame him either, though. It's just frustrating, I guess, from a media, like from a public standpoint, where Fox could have taken a little bit of a high road in that sense, right? He didn't have to be all gushy, not even close. Because again, I think there's two things at play here. I think the Olympic snub bothers him, and I don't really blame him. And the direction of the team is concerning for someone who is in the prime of his career. So I think there's a couple of factors. But yes, the Fox situation is one that is very much going to be one of the storylines in the offseason. It is. It is to that point. Um, Ultimately, I still believe that come opening night next season, Adam Fox will be a Ranger. That's my prediction, but it is very much on the table. That is not the case. And I don't know that even when the letter came out, I don't think that. And look, the Olympic summit already happened, but that wasn't on my mind. It is way more on my mind now, and in large part due to Adam Fox's comments, in these post game pressers. Um, so look, this was a game where Igor Shesterkin was not very good, right? I've talked about how, him coming back changes the paradigm in terms of the Rangers as far as their tanking. It's going to be tougher. And Shesterkin didn't have a very good game, right? Not all the goals were his fault, but I'd say a couple were ones that he'd want to have back at the very least. So, um, I wasn't sure if there was a possibility that maybe I figured he would play in this game, but I thought if there was maybe one game where they would consider sitting, it would be this one. They didn't. And it seems like we're going to see a lot of Igor down the stretch. Look, they're in the business of trying to win games, as frustrating as that is. So only one lineup change, and it's on defense, and it's Vincent Iorio taking the spot of Scott Morrow. So yet again, Johnny Brodzinski a healthy scratch. Yet again, Urhel Vakanainen a healthy scratch. And they're just going back and forth between Morrow and Iorio, which I don't look. We'll see. It'll be interesting to see when the dust settles. What does the defense look like? AKA, is Braden Schneider dealt by the deadline? Because that's really the only question I think we have here of actual legitimacy. Like, I wouldn't think Will Borgen is dealt, like he could, but like I wouldn't. It doesn't feel like that's happening given the fact they gave him an extension, um, you know, just less than a year ago. So, and actually, Will Borgen did have both of them. To be fair, both of them, more so Borgen, but that pair, I think that pair has actually been halfway decent, in my opinion, with Schneider on the left, Borgen on the right. But yeah, a Schneider trade feels possible, right? Trocheck feels almost definite. And then the next one to me that's interesting, of someone of real value. Not that I think Brady Schneider's anything amazing. And I'm not including the Taylor Radishes or Sam Carrick. Not that, and look, Sam Carrick could get you back something halfway decent. Nothing amazing. But Schneider, look, I think his perceived value is still solid. And so again, he's someone to look at. And so we'll get a better sense of this whole defensive situation. But for now, they're kind of going back and forth with Morrow and Iorio. And Morrow is the one that clearly you're looking more from, right? Like he was somewhat of a highly touted prospect coming from Carolina in the Keandre Miller deal, where Vince Iorio was a waiver pickup. That's just, but they're kind of being used in somewhat of a 50-50 fashion. And I don't know if that's temporary or if that's kind of here to stay. I don't know if like Iorio is getting more of a look because of the logjam that's coming if they keep Braden Schneider, and it's like it's sort of a sink or swim for Iorio, where they know that Morrow will get his looks. And look, for both of them, and again, it's a difference. You want to look at it in a different scale, but I understand there are some similarities. I guess they're both right-handed, both sort of bigger in stature, but Morrow is looked upon as more of an offensive-minded defenseman. Iorio, I think, more of a physical, stay-at-home type defenseman would seem to be the profile there. But anyway, that was the one change that was made. And so the goalie matchup was Igor Shesterkin against Merzlikins, Elvis Merzlikins for the Columbus Blue Jackets. And again, Zach Werenski was out, which ends up maybe being the difference between the Rangers getting no points and 1 point. But I don't know if it's also fair to make that statement when Columbus, it wasn't as if offense was really the problem for Columbus. They did end up scoring 5 goals. And so it's not as if Werenski being out was an issue there. And they were 1 for 1 on the power play, which obviously Werenski is a top end power play quarterback. But this was one pretty slow sort of beginning, the first like 5 or so minutes, where the Rangers, they were fine. They weren't bad. Rangers really generated nothing offensively in the first period at all. Picked up a little bit in the second period, but nothing in the first. Uh, and Columbus gets on the board first. A goal by Adam Fantilli, a 16th goal of the season, assisted by Marchenko and um, Matejchuk. Feel like I'm pronouncing that one wrong, but just bear with me on that one. Um, Maybe not. So anyway, Fantilli gets the winner. Sorry, not the winner. Uh, it was actually Marchenko that got the winner, but Fantilli scores the first goal of this one, and the Rays had a chance on their end. Mika Zibanejad shoots the puck, from a decent spot, but Merzlikins makes the stop. And the other way goes Columbus. And this is the Zibanejad line with Miller and Perreault, Gavrikov and Fox on. Gavrikov gets caught up a little bit, but they kind of had the numbers, but they all go back so aggressively. And a nice smart back pass um, by Matejchuk to Marchenko, and then Marchenko with, puts it right in Fantilli's wheelhouse, and it's an easy tip and pass Shesterkin. So this one wasn't Shesterkin's fault, but a transition goal for Columbus gives them a 1-0 lead. And really from there, I thought the Blue Jackets game picked up. And at 14:34, the Rangers get called for a bench minor on sportsman conduct. We've seen that numerous times, whether it's been Vincent Trocheck specifically, whether it's been Mike Sullivan. Like, that's happened a lot this season. And you can't, look, I prefer the Rangers lose these games, but the point is that you can't let those things happen. And look, if you want to blame Wes McCauley for being too sensitive, like, fine, you can go there. I don't know enough about the situation to say that, but it's happened too many times for me to call it a fluke. And I forget the reason that they had said that Sullivan was frustrated. Not important. I don't exactly remember what it had been, but it leads to a 2-minute minor. And on that, the one power play Columbus had, they score. And it was Marchenko scoring his 21st goal of the season from Provorov and Coyle. And this was one that goes off the stick of Matthew Robertson. So, one-timer from Provorov to Marchenko, slap shot and in. And again, this is another one. I'm not going to blame Igor on this one because of the redirect off of the stick of Matthew Robertson, who I didn't think, Robertson had a bit of a rough game for sure. Call it whatever you want it, but not a great game for Matthew Robertson. And the score is 2-0 at the end of one, where Columbus was in pretty damn good control after one period. Second period rolls around, and it appeared as if the Rangers might, do what they've done, or let's just say do what they did against Pittsburgh. Let's just leave it at that. At 2:14, Boone Jenner trips Matthew Robertson, and soon thereafter, it looked like JT Miller had scored a power play goal. But Columbus challenges for goal interference, and they were proved to be correct and successful, as Alexis Lafreniere was, deemed to have made head contact with Merzlikins in the blue paint. Look, I thought this was the correct call. To me, and I know it was a little bit different, slightly different, but in the Pittsburgh game, the Rangers challenged for goal interference against the Penguins, and it was correct. It took a Penguin goal off the board. And I looked at this one, and look, Dave Maloney was freaking out and complaining. Look, I thought that this was a reasonable call. I really did. And I'm not just saying that because I wanted Columbus to win. I really believe that was the right call. It wasn't egregious. It wasn't overly aggressive. But look, he was not only was in the crease, and there was some head contact. Which look, like, if you're going to set the precedent, that's the question, right? Is the inconsistency. But lately, maybe it's more because the Olympics are on my mind, which is a little bit of a more stricter rule policy. I do think that was correctly called. And it was a huge swing because what could have been 2-1 Rangers, 20 seconds later or so, Sean Monahan scores his 11th goal of the season. It's a shorthanded goal at 3:27 to give the Blue Jackets a 3-0 lead. It was a pass from Trocheck to Zibanejad that didn't connect, and then kind of went a 2-on-1 where Adam Fox probably gives a little bit too much room, but I get it. As the goalie, you want the clear. Like, you don't want the last thing the goalie wants is for the pass to go through and it's an easy tap in for the trailing player. So, but I still think Fox probably could have given Monahan a little bit of a tougher time. He didn't, and Monahan scores past Shesterkin. So that makes it 3-0 right there. And then a little later on at 11:54, Matthew Olivier scores his ninth goal of the season from Coyle and Severson. And this was one where it's the character line that was on, and change of possession behind the Columbus net goes the other way. And Matthew Robertson gives much too much room to Matthew Olivier on this one. I think that Olivier streaking down the right side, Carrick couldn't quite get there. I think Robertson needed more support, but I think it's still one that Igor wants to have back. It wasn't as if Olivier was some great snipe, right? Whereas I think I'm more forgiving of the Monahan stranded goal. The Olivier one, that's one that Igor I think should have probably stopped, to be honest. And so it's 4-0 Blue Jackets at that point, and they take that 4-0 lead going into the third. Fans are booing, deservedly so. Seen it many times at home, despite the comebacks. Many, sort of awful, awful performances, and this was yet another one. But yet everything turned very, very. That was the key for the Rangers, is it all happened so quickly in the third to get it going, and it gave them belief. 30 seconds in, the former Blue Jacket, Vladislav Gavrikov, scores his 10th goal of the season. Pretty remarkable for a guy that going into the season had a career high of 6 goals. In his 60th game as a Ranger, scores his 10th. Part of it looks like he has a very big role in this team. There's a little bit of power play time there as well. Although only 2 of the 10 goals are on the power play, to be fair, right? So, and it was a nice play behind it was a pass behind the net. Lafreniere and Cooley get the assist. It was a shot by Cooley from the side that Lafreniere retrieves behind the net, makes a nice little backhand pass to Gavrikov, who scores to make it 4-1. Okay, so that's one thing. No biggie. Then where it gets serious is 24 seconds later, Gabe Perreault. And Gabe Perreault, whether it's been reflected on the score sheet or not lately, he's played a lot better. And boy, did he explode in this third period. At the 54-second mark, I believe it was Matejchuk who was the one, it was, who fumbles the puck. Perreault doesn't waste any time, and a wrist shot from a little bit of distance, a fluttering puck that goes past Merzlikins. It's not a great goal by Merzlikins, but probably, again, because of kind of the wonky nature of the puck, it's 4-2, just like that. And so Rick Bowness, interim head coach of the Columbus Blue Jackets, calls a timeout, trying to settle things down. And it seemed like it kind of did do that for a little bit of time. However, the Rangers at 12:52 on a delayed penalty cut it to 4-3. Will Borgen, who was very much involved on these last 2 goals here, this one being the first of them, he scores his 4th goal of the season from Perreault and JT Miller. So what happens here is the Rangers get the extra attacker on. I think it was Trocheck that comes on the ice. Miller had been taken down in front to lead to this possibility. Miller actually took a shot to the helmet at one point. Didn't seem much worse for wear. Actually gets up and he takes a shot towards the net. It was originally a pass by Zibanejad, and then Gabe Perreault's in front. He kind of gets a stick on it, I believe, and it ends up going off the skate of Borgen and in. You had both defensemen. Again, when you have the 6-on-5, that's what's going to happen, right? There's really no risk as far as what happens on the back end, because if Columbus touches the puck, the play stops. So Borgen was right in front. It was not a kicking motion. Fortunate, but you put yourself in those fortunate situations. And so it becomes 4-3 in the net. So at that point, I'm thinking it's just a matter of time where the Rangers tied up, and they do exactly that at 15-14. So this didn't even take a goalie pull. The Rangers down 4-0 in the third. They almost won this game in regulation, as a matter of fact. But it's Perreault scoring his 2nd goal of the game. So his first 2-goal game in the NHL. 5th goal of the season from Borgen and Trocheck. So Vincent Trocheck right there gets what is very likely his last point as a Ranger. And Borgen was given way too much space, but also a nice pass to Gabe Perreault, who is just crashing right up the middle and scores past Merzlikins to tie it up at 4. Again, chances on both sides at the end, but the Rangers really came close to winning this, which how crazy would that have been if the Rangers' first regulation win at home since November 24th was in a game that they were losing 4-0 in the third? Would have been one of the most ridiculous things ever. But it does go to overtime, just as the last two games had. The first game, the Flyers won in overtime, the 3-on-3. Second game, the Rangers won in a shootout, which, the Rangers have been 3-0 in the shootout, including a shootout win versus Columbus earlier in the season, the only other meeting these two teams had, which was on November 15th. Rangers losing the shootout against Pittsburgh. Sorry, win the shootout against Pittsburgh. And then in this game, they lose. And the Rangers initially had possession of the puck, but a Gabe Perreault wide shot and Vincent Trocheck just over pursuing unnecessarily leads to a 2-on-1 the other way. So again, Perreault wide, goes off the board. Trocheck tries to go towards Severson, which just didn't make much sense. And so Gavrikov's the only one back, and Kirill Marchenko scores his 22nd goal of the season. It was his second goal of the game, assisted by Severson and Fantilli at 1:04. So Columbus escapes with the 2 points, even though they almost blew up, a 4-0 lead, which would have been pretty devastating. I understand it would have only been 1 point. I mean, look, if they had lost regulation to cost them 2 points, wow, that would have been significant. But Columbus, I'm not impressed by the fact that they blew this 4-0 game. I know there's no Werenski, but also the goal with Igor. I understand it's Marchenko. I understand it's a high danger chance, but it's one that Igor could have stopped. He got there was some contact there, right? But kind of squeaks past Shesterkin, and the Blue Jackets win 5-4 in overtime. So again, the big things that come out of this game for me, again, is just the fact that it was 4-0 and they get a point, and that it was Gabe Perreault that kind of leads them there with the 2 goals and an assist in the third period alone. And the schedule eases up, and the roster should get worse. I mean, it's certainly not going to get better, right? Even if it's just Vincent Trocheck. But we'll see. We'll see if there's any episodes that I'll be recording before the Maple Leaf game. Toronto's a team that is struggling mightily, and so they're in somewhat of a similar situation to the Rangers. And I think that, look, that's a winnable game for the Rangers at home against Toronto. And then from there, the Rangers play the Devils, Flyers again, Calgary, Winnipeg. Like, these are winnable games that even if you trade Vincent Trocheck, and even if it's someone else, like, I fear, based on what I've seen, that the Rangers might get some points. But if you can do it with players like Gabe Perreault contributing, you can live with it more. Right? Think about last game. Taylor Radish got a tying goal. That's not what you're looking for. You can't feel good about that. As much as I like Sam Carrick scored the first game back. That's, on a fluky goal. That's something to be proud of. Gabe Perreault, at least you can take something from that legitimately. You need young players to produce, and Gabe Perreault, no one more important than Gabe Perreault with the current landscape of this team. He's the only young player you can feel somewhat okay about, and they need him to perform, and you can see something with him. I'm not saying he's going to be a superstar, but there's something there with Gabe Perreault. But yeah, we're going to see what happens, and maybe there might be very minimal activity from the New York Rangers. We have no idea, but there's a couple of days off here, and then, like I said, that one game Thursday night against the Maple Leafs before the Friday deadline. So that's the most interesting thing. Look, interest is going to go down a bit. Like, the games are the games. Nothing changes there. But, like, this is a very pivotal time for the Rangers in what they decide to do. And it leads into the offseason as well, right? It's not now or never. But what are the moves? And it is something going to come out of left field. Are multiple moves going to be made? Very curious to see what that is. And for roster management purposes, at the very least, if Vincent Trocheck's still on this roster, I have to think he doesn't play against Toronto, but we shall see what happens. So, again, the Rangers find a way to get a point. Miraculously, down 4-0, tie the game up 4-4. Again, Gabe Perreault with 3 points in the third period, but at the end of the day, they lose in overtime to the Columbus Blue Jackets by a score of 5-4.